You're earning $2,000 a month, and you want to know how much you can realistically save. Well, there are two ways to answer that question. The first way is mathematically, where we take your income and subtract all of your fixed expenses to figure out how much disposable income you have left over, and then from there, decide how much of that you should be saving. The second approach is psychological, where we look at what other people in your position are doing, what they view as a comfortable lifestyle, and the portion of their income they manage to save. And that figure will almost always differ from the initial response. So today we're going to go through both approaches, and hopefully at the end of the video, you'll walk away with a clear picture of how much you should be aiming to save. Let's get started. So for this example, let's use someone who earns $2,000 a month after taxes. This is about equivalent to a full-time entry-level position in many major cities like New York or London. So our hypothetical person lives in a one-bedroom apartment and pays $800 a month in rent. That's 40% of their gross income. They spend $200 a month on utilities and $200 on groceries. These numbers include things like electricity, water, gas, Wi-Fi, etc. And they spend $100 a month on transportation. This includes their monthly Metro pass and the occasional Uber when it's late at night and they don't feel like taking the train. So just like that, their total fixed expenses equal $1,300 or 65% of their gross income. That leaves them with $700 a month in disposable income. Now, according to the math, if they were to cut back on some of their discretionary spending, maybe skip the morning coffee, make it to work on time, so they don't need to pay for the occasional Uber and cook at home more often, they could probably bring that number up to 50% and save $1,000 a month. But does this actually reflect reality? If you ask other people in the same position, they'll likely tell you that they're spending closer to 90% of their income and are only able to save around $300 a month. And the reason they're able to do this is because they've accepted a lower standard of living. Let's look at the numbers. Rent is still 40% of their gross income. It's $800 a month. Utilities are also 40%. Groceries are 20%. And transportation is 10%. Now those percentages add up to 110%, which means they're spending more than they earn. So where did that extra 10 come from? Came from accepting a lower standard of living. They found a roommate and cut rent in half. They shop around for cheaper phone plans and internet packages. They cook every meal at home and brown bag their lunches to work. They buy generic brands instead of name brands, clip coupons, and wait for sales. They use public transportation or bike or walk whenever possible. They take the stairs instead of the elevator. They buy used clothes online instead of going to the mall. They repurpose old furniture instead of buying new. They do their own laundry instead of going to the laundromat. They drink tap water instead of buying bottled water. They make coffee at home instead of getting it at Starbucks. If they really wanted to, they could make it 120% and save even more by accepting an even lower standard of living. But now we have a problem. According to the first approach, 50% is the highest that we could realistically save. But the second approach says that we can save more by accepting an even lower standard of living. So which one is right? Well, the answer depends on what you think is normal and acceptable. Is it normal and acceptable to spend 110% of your income? Well, technically no, but it's better than spending 120%, which is technically worse than spending 130%. And besides, isn't it okay to spend more than you earn, as long as you're paying yourself first by saving money? After all, if you're only able to save $300 a month, that's $1,500 a year. And if you invest that money in stock market at age 25, assuming an 8% return, that becomes $2 million when you retire. That's not bad at all. So if you're happy with $2 million when you retire, then it doesn't matter whether you save $300, $800, or $1,300 a month. You're still going to end up with the exact same amount. So the real question is not how much can I save, but rather how much do I need to save? There's no point in pushing yourself to the limit by saving 50% of your income. If you're sacrificing your happiness and well-being, you'd be better off bringing that number down to 30% and being much happier. This is why I believe that the best way to figure out how much you should be saving is by figuring out what you want your life to look like. Let me explain. Let's say you make $2,000 each month with fixed expenses totaling $1,300, leaving you with $700 a month in disposable income. What would happen if you saved $100 of that? Well, you'd have $600 left over, which means you'd have to accept a lower standard of living to make up the other $100. What would that look like? Maybe you'd have to eat instant noodles every night, or the same clothes every day and forget about going out with friends. Or maybe you'd be able to find creative solutions like cooking with cheaper ingredients, buying used clothes online, using public transportation, etc. But what if you doubled your savings to $200? Well, now you have $500 left over, which means you'd have to accept an even lower standard of living. What would that look like? Maybe you'd have to move to a cheaper neighborhood, buy a less fancy phone plan, stop buying new clothes, etc. And here's the thing, you could keep doing this until you got down to zero, and theoretically you could even save $100 of your income. But at what cost? Is it worth it to you to eat instant noodles every day, never go out with friends, etc.? I personally don't think it is. In fact, I don't think anyone should live like that unless they want to. So if you're in this situation, I encourage you to think about what you actually want your life to look like, what you're willing to compromise on, and what you're not. And then based on that, figure out how much you need to save. Because here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with saving 100% of your income, especially if you're happy with the lifestyle that comes along with it. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with saving $300 of your income, either, as long as you're happy with the lifestyle that comes along with it. What matters most is that you're happy with your decision, whatever it may be. Okay, so hopefully by now you have a good idea of how much you should be saving. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, all the best.